Okay, today we are going to make a little felted rock. This little guy is covered in white merino and then red merino with some spikes. So I'll show you all the things you need, and we're going to go through all the different stages. First thing, of course, you need a rock. You see this one's a lot bigger. Doesn't really matter the size. I like to get one that at least has a bottom where it won't just roll away on you. So decide where the bottom is. I think this flat side works best as the bottom for this guy, but you can see it's quite irregular. The only thing you don't want is sharp edges because that will cut through the wool. So you want a rock. You want to cut, this is optional, but I like to cut a little bit of a bubble wrap just to wrap around it partially. And what this does is it creates a little more air so that when you're shrinking the little sweater down, it actually has somewhere to go. As a beginner, you could do it without that. You would still get a felted cover. It just may not be quite as firm because it won't have enough room to shrink down to get firm. So what I've done in this particular case is I just cut it so that it'll wrap fairly easily in one direction, and really I can do it from either side. It doesn't really matter. Okay, this will get released when you cut the little hole for the face. So in this case, I will have it on the top, and I think the face is going to go right here. So when I cut that hole, we'll be able to take that out and then shrink it further. So we have that. We need, this will be the base cover. I've just pulled about 2 feet of it. You should have lots left over. You really don't need a lot, so you certainly can go into your stash or find a little assortment of various colors. In this case, I use merino, but Corriedale or any other soft wool top will work just as well. So I have that for the base, and then I have that for the top color. Previous to this, I've also pulled off about 3 6-inch sections. These will be the little spikes that go on top. Okay. And of course, I lay towel down on the table because that just catches any spills. And you need just regular bubble wrap. It certainly can be a lot smaller than this. It could be, like really that wide. Just something that that you get something packaged and mailed to you would do. Or just a little bit of commercial packaging bubble wrap, okay? And then obviously to make felt, you need soapy water. So I've got this bucket. I do have a little sprayer, but you could just dip your hands in and do it like that. It's a small project, that would work too. I've got hot water in there, just up to here, you won't need that much. And then I put about a teaspoon of dish detergent. I like the fragrance-free and no dye one just because it doesn't irritate my sinuses, but really any kind would work. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start by just start with your little resist. If you don't have that, you can actually start with the rock and start rolling it over, but in a lot of ways this makes it super easy to start. And we'll start with the inside color. And I know it's hard to see the resist, but there it is. We're going to put it vertically and horizontally. Sorry, hang on a sec. And we're just pulling out like thin but even layers, and just to the point where you really don't see the little resist under it. And then you'll go in the other way and have it so that the little ends are going about 1 inch past, or maybe even a couple centimeters past the edge of the resist. Sorry, my hand's still wet from the water. Okay, so that's the first layer. And then we are just going to wet that down. Oh, and I forgot, you should get ingredient. You need a little bit of a netting. I just got, you know, those little lingerie bags that you can get in the dollar store and convenience store and Walmart, and I just cut it open. So that works really well. Super easy, it's not big. And what that does, it allows you to flatten it without it sticking to your fingers. And just even that little bit of flattening will allow you to pick it up and flip it over. Okay, now I'm going to put this rock face side down. So that, remember, that was the bottom. And if I just dampen the rock a little bit, and then most important, dry my hands. We're going to lay just a layer on the rock. Going right and left, and then up and down. Again, rolling around to the other side just a little bit. And sprinkle that just a teeny bit. Pressing it to the rock just so that it really sticks to the rock. But we're not felting it or anything yet. It's just flattening it. So you can see that. It's sort of hugging the rock. And then the resist, oops, I was supposed to put it this way. The resist will come up. And you'll just wrap it around. And this is the under layer, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just pressing it just a tiny bit. And you can see it's covered everywhere. Again, dry hands before you handle fiber again. And then just to make sure that seal is there, we're just going to put a few new, just wisps of, not a lot, over it. Okay. And just smooth that down. Okay, now when I pick it up, I'm just gently wrapping the netting around, and I'm just squeezing just to make sure the water is right through to the bottom layers of the fiber. And there we go. Isn't that pretty? Okay, so again, I have it sitting with the flat part on the bottom. This is where I anticipate the face is going to go, and the lining fiber is there. Now we're going to do the upper layer. Again, drying my hands really well. Doesn't really matter which side you start on. Either way, you're going to have to cover it completely. So we're going right to left. Oops, it's getting all fly away on me. Everything you can get to without falling over the edge. It is a little bit damp, so you can kind of press it in a bit. And then I just dampen it to make sure it stays. Not adding tons of water because there's already some underneath, but it's just enough to dampen the top layer. And then again, just press it. Make it hug the rock. Not rubbing. Because you don't want to, if you're rubbed at this point, you could disturb the fiber and maybe create a hole. But just pressing it down. There you go, see that? Look at that. And then we flip the little guy over. This time I just pull it to the other side. Dry your hands. It's neat when you use two different colors for the two layers, because you can clearly see that it is covered or not. And you just really want to make sure you get enough fiber everywhere. Look. And it's also important to get 2 different directions because that makes for very strong felt. Makes it shrink in all the directions that it needs to. Okay. Pressing it down. Again, this is the bottom. And then I'm just going to pick it up and roll the fiber to the other side and press, press, press. You see a few little wispy bits at the top, but that's easy to smooth. So here's where the face is going to go. I'm going to cut a little face space just out of the front right there. You can picture it. Okay, before we do anything else, then now we have to make the spikes because that has to get attached at this stage. I have to really make sure my hands are dry. Not helpful when you're touching it all the time. So these 6-inch pieces, that one actually is quite thin, so I'm going to leave that alone. And then I'm going to split the others. I like 5. You certainly, once you get experience, you could do lots. You could make it crazy. You could even do just 2 or 3 or 1, whatever you like. So I've got 5 here. The way we start, we need one end to stay a little bit fluffy. It probably will get wet just in the process of doing it, but don't actively rub it. So you'll notice, see, I'm getting my hand just a little wet. And I'm just really very lightly rolling it. Like I have almost no pressure. I have only enough pressure to grab it so that it rolls. And what we're doing here is creating a skin on the outside of the fiber so that the outside layer is starting to felt to itself and barely touching it, just enough to make it run. And you can see already that it's shrinking down. That's our idea, is we want to get it so that the air is gone. And you don't want a lot of water in this, actually. It goes much easier if you've only got what amount of water you get on one hand. At this point, I'm actually going to squeeze out some of the water. And then continue to roll. Again, no pressure on it. It's just rolling with my hand. And you'll notice that this end I'm trying to keep as dry as possible. And now I'm going a little bit faster. And again, not leaning on it, but just enough to really make it move. And it sticks to my hand. Now I've got a little more pressure because I can feel that it's a little more of a rope underneath, as opposed to just mushy soft fiber. And yeah, I can feel that it's getting tougher there. And just do the tip. And one more time, very hard. Especially at the bottom here, that little spot there, right where it's going to join. You want that as firm as possible. There. Quite happy with that. This end's still fluffy. You can see it pulls apart very easily. And off we go with a few more. A little bit of over dye in this fiber. You can see it's coming up a little bit pink. Number 2. Every once in a while I stop and smooth it out just to make sure there's no permanent kinks being rubbed into it. And the other thing you can do if it's getting just a little too wispy down at the end, just give it a little trim. The firmer you are with it, the more they'll just stand up by themselves when we're done. And that's kind of the look we want. We don't want it to be a floppy hairdo. We want it to be spikes. They don't all have to be the same length. That can be part of the charm. But at the end, if you want them all like, you know, equal distance, you can always give it a haircut. There's 3. Oops. There we are. There we go. Last one. I'm going to do 5. I like the number 5. What we're looking for is to get them the kind of firmness that they really are almost fully felted. And that stops them from coming back and sticking on the rock itself as we're working it. You almost can just let them fly wherever they want, and the ends of them won't stick. But the fluffy part, which hasn't been felted, felts very easily into the rock, and that's what we want. One last little bit just up at the top. There we go. And that one's going to be good to go. It's a nice little short one. Okay, so we'll get our cute little rock back. She's cooled off a little bit, so I'm just going to re-wet it, make it a bit warmer. Some little fluff stuck there. All right, so because the face is going to be here, in my mind, I'm going to put the rock or the spikes down the back. So it's very simple. You get the first one, you spread out the roots, slide it out, stroke it in. If it's a little too dry, just get your fingers just wet and just caress the loose fiber until it's there, kind of blended in, right? And so the next one, again, you spread the little roots out, and you do want it fairly close together, so you'll split one side. If it's a halo all the way around, split one side so that you can hug it right up against the next one, and then wrap those pieces around there, and then continue to spread the roots out as thin as you can. It's good not to have a rough edge at the edge of these roots, because it actually could create a little bit of a fold that doesn't quite get in. So what I'm talking about is if you just left this as a ridge, it may not completely felt in. So you want to open it up so that it's very thin fibers that are happy to migrate through the other pieces. And then we'll put this guy here. Again, pulling the fiber. Let's see if we can show it this way. Pulling the fiber out. And you really want to make sure that that first bit of felting is right against the body. So pull it down. Otherwise it could maybe flop over like it's doing now, but it'll hold firm eventually. And we're opening this. There. Stretching it out. And then just deciding if the last piece needs to be maybe up top. I'm going to run one of the roots right through and spread it out. All right, so we're having a look, making sure all the fiber is spread down, nice and even. Just pressing it a bit. Okay, when you're happy with where it's placed, again, in a way we're going to ignore these, but you want to be gentle with them because you could actually pull them off. So ignore them, but don't pull at them. And I'm just wrapping this around in order to just create some warmth in the soapy water. Really press everything firm. And we're also going to check and make sure we don't see any gold fiber coming through. Oop, there's a little loose bit. And then we'll wrap the whole thing up. Now we're going to start the work. Because it's not a flat piece, we can't roll it up in the bubble wrap, so we're actually going to manipulate it by hand. And we're just gently rubbing here. So this is not a hard push. What we're doing is trying to get the surface to create a crust, and having the netting wrapped around stops the fibers from sticking to my hand and gives me access to just gently rub slippery over the surface. You want to keep it very smooth, and you can feel it underneath. So give it a good rub to the top, all around, where, especially around where the new spikes have been laid. This is not a hard pressure, just a nice massage. And we'll do this for, about a minute all over. Sorry, losing my background music. There we go. Yeah, I'm rubbing a little bit firmer. Not hard, just maybe a little faster, more agitation. You can feel the shape of the rock underneath. And of course, it's quite heavy. All right. Now we're going to the soap there. Now what we'll see is there's it feels like a skin on it. This thing keeps sticking to my finger. A little bit of white fluff. And you should be able to gently rub it right with your hand now. Again, this hand is supporting the roots so that I can rub really close to them without disturbing them. love the smell of soapy wool. Still, you can see on the pinch test it's not quite solid yet, so, but it's already starting to firm up quite a bit. So another minute of rubbing like this. And then this is starting to feel pretty solid. So I'm just going to put my fingers right at the roots of this and give it a good rub. Because this part has not been, like the in between has not been rubbed as much, and you can feel it moving quite a bit. So we need to start shrinking that. And so all I'm doing is pushing down and then just vibrating it back and forth to get it started. And then you can just rub the whole thing. Make sure you change the position of the little spikes every once in a while. That way it gets rubbed from each direction. But you can see I'm not worried about the spikes sticking to the body. Okay, and the last thing I do to give it a good rub is try to open this up and actually rub it right on the bubble wrap. Change the position. This is shrinking down the place where it's attached to the sweater. Look at that. That looks good. That looks really good. Okay, one more overall rub everywhere, a little more aggressive, and then we're going to cut the face. Especially on this side where we're going to cut. Rub the top bits, make sure they're still engaged. Yep, looking good. Okay, so tricky part, cutting the hole for the face. You want it to be very small, so you're going to pull it a pinch out and just aggressively cut a little hole, and you can see it's right through to the underside. And for sure you want it to be a tiny hole to start, okay? If you cut a big hole, you can't make it smaller. If you cut a small hole, you can make it bigger. All right. You can see that's not terribly even. I'm just gonna trim it a little bit, although it will shrink down. And before we take the little resist out, I'm just going to try to seal up this opening by rubbing it in every direction. And you'll notice it gets a little bigger. Yeah, I like that. That's good. So now I'm just going to try to, before it's shrunk too much, try to grab this and take it out. And of course my hands are slippery. Let's give it a pull. It might wreck or rip, but that's no big deal. Okay, just going to tidy up any little bits that have come with it. There we go. You can see how much bigger the hole got. So that's why you want to start with, you know, if you want it the size of a quarter, you start with the size of a dime. Okay. It will shrink down a teeny bit just because the whole thing will shrink, but not a lot. That's probably the biggest mistake beginners make, is cutting it the size they think they want it finished at. And then of course it gets much bigger and maybe the whole rock will fall out of it. So yeah, you don't want to be too aggressive there. Now, because it's gone, you'll notice the whole thing is a little bit loose, the whole jacket. And so we're just going to spend maybe another 5 minutes, make sure it gets nice and hot. And we're going to spend another 5 minutes just rubbing in every direction. You can do it by hand. You can do it with the net. Get that over. If that's more comfortable, every direction. Because you just really want to shrink it nice and tight. It's well sealed on the surface, so yeah, you can be as rough with it now as you want. You can dip it in hot water. That will accelerate it too. And of course you can rub it on the bubble wrap. With a lot of my other projects, I throw them on the table, but because it's a rock, I wouldn't recommend that. That would not be good. But I am kind of just rolling it around. Probably popping a few bubbles here, but that's always fun. I can hear one. And look at that, just like it's not lifting at all anymore on the sides. So it's just shrunk down that little bit extra. Is already pretty cute. Okay, so I'm just going to stop the video and give it a really good rinse, and then we'll finish up. So I just took it upstairs and ran it under cold water. A long time, just flipping it all over the place and running it under cold. And then you can either blot it with a towel, or even better, if you're brave, put it in your washing machine if you've got an upright, in the spin cycle and let it spin the water out of it, which is what I do. And so now I've got it sitting here, and you'll notice I'm pulling the spikes. I had trimmed a couple of them, and I'm going to just trim the ones that I don't like the ends. And you'll notice if you hold the root and pull it, it will become quite straight, and that's the way I like it. If you actually wanted it to be like kinky like that, all you'd have to do is just put a little twist tie or something on it and let it dry like that, and it would stay like that. But I like them straight up. And then usually I wait till it's completely dry, but I'll just show you. I like to just find the face in there. And I'll probably emphasize it a little more once it's dry. But this guy looks like just a cute little 2-eye mouth face. Something like that. Also, if you have a little, you can see here where the gold bit maybe is a little fluffy at that one spot, I'll just trim that back. It's not that I want it to be perfectly symmetrical, but I don't know. You just follow what your eye seems to want. And then, of course, let the whole thing dry like that. But he's now got a friend, and I think they're really quite adorable. You can see the face there. And the spikes. And he's completely covered. And there's some spots where, you know, there's a little gold showing through, but I think that's kind of the charm. The sweater is very fuzzy. If you want it less fuzzy, you can actually take a razor and shave down the fuzz a little bit, but I certainly don't mind a fuzzy woolly sweater. And there you go. You've learned how to make a felt covered rock.